Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of our Seventh Valkyrie Director's Commentary for the launch of A Slanted Reflection. Very excited about this one. Kind of going to go over the format again, just in case you haven't seen the previous ones. New readers, as always, beware. I will be going over spoilers, talking about kind of behind the scenes, which is, as always, fun if you have read the stuff, but not so much if you're getting it spoiled for you. So if you haven't read Slanted Reflection, go. You can get it on Kindle, you can get it in paperback, actually. You can get it on our audiobook on seventhvalkyrie.com. Anyway, go read it. It's a great book, in my personal humble opinion. But yeah, no, and then come back. These videos are available on Facebook, they're on YouTube, everywhere I can find a way to put them. They're available on the podcast. So you can find them. It'll still be here. You can come back. Anyway, onward into this week's episode, we're focusing on chapters 6, 7, and 8. Getting right to it. Chapter 6, A Caged Hound. Val is trapped in prison here, and he's still just a human. We open to him sort of recovering from his wounds, and definitely likely to be a little bit less than full strength for a minute after his confrontation with the two members of the Light Corps. I'll adjust this a little bit. For me, the persistence of little bumps, bruises, cuts, wounds, scars, etc., injuries in general are something I like to keep track of whenever possible, which is a pet peeve I didn't know about that I had from movies and TV before I started getting on r/squared circle, which is a professional wrestling Reddit subreddit. And I heard about a concept called selling. Selling is actually a huge concept in pro wrestling, and it's how you make fictional fights and events feel real. If someone hits you in the leg, you might limp a little bit. When someone hits you in the arm, maybe you struggle to lift somebody up, or it hurts to throw a punch. When someone smashes your head with a chair, you fake a cut. Well, sometimes you don't even fake it, sometimes you just cut yourself. And people can see you bleeding. So it feels like there's something happening as a result of this fight, rather than just two action figures bumping into each other. Which makes sense. If you've ever seen how absolutely wrecked pro fighters get after a UFC match, look a few up. The same thing applies to fiction. If you help your characters sell, it actually makes the threat that they're overcoming seem more worth overcoming, more challenging, and it makes them look tougher by the process. Because the opposite effect is called no selling, which is a huge term in wrestling, which can be valuable at times. You want to show a vast power difference, or someone they're fighting. If Val was gonna bump into a 7-year-old kid and they tried to punch him in the leg, he's not going to sell that because he's obviously it's Val versus a 7-year-old kid. But in the fight, for example, with the Light Corps, where Val's tired, exhausted, if he didn't take some hits from that fight, I mean, what do we think about the Light Corps if these elite soldiers can't even do anything to him, when he's weak and beat down, and then you could try and make the argument that Val's super fucking superhero, but anyway, if no one takes damage and no one gets hurt and there are no lasting effects to a fight, it just feels, like I said before, action figures bumping together. So that's kind of this idea of Val took some damage. These fights have consequences, which I like. Anyway, speaking of someone who's had been on the tail end of a lot of fights, Rat. Every once in a while you come upon a character that is just fun to write. Sometimes you come upon a character that are an absolute thrill to voice, and Rat for me was both. Not exactly sure what it is about that slick back grease rat of a person that makes me love him so darn much, but slipping into his accent, getting to mess around with Val is a hoot. I was thinking maybe I'll make a buddy cop spin-off with them at some point in the future. It's Rat and Val. Anyway, through Rat, we get to see kind of the first touch of the Machine King's influence. That even here in this prison in the heart of Edara, or in the heart of the Edaran city, this ghost in the shadows is still a prominent force. Speaking of, kind of the conflict between Edarans and the Freelanders, the dynamic between sort of law and lawlessness is a big undercurrent in this whole story. Earlier in this series, in I think chapter 3, BC talks a bit about how most Freelanders have already pretty much well accepted that they're just going to live beyond Edaran laws, and kind of the fact that Edara is essentially a dominant homogeneous ethno-state. Like these racial conflicts that are happening, the conflict between the Freelanders, between those who are gifted, the X's, and normal humans, are pretty much codified into law, and it's pretty much it's a few shades short of just it's illegal to not be Edaran. It creates an interesting dynamic between the military, between civilians, and then especially in this prison. Prisoners of different races. In the cells, there's definite animosity towards the Edaran military, because criminals have it's just a cultural thing where criminals tend to not really like the police that much. But it's more of a gray area for Edaran prisoners. After all, most of them still feel kind of like they're above the Freelanders, despite the fact that they've stepped outside of these boundaries that are supposedly separating the good Edarans from these savage, unpredictable Freelanders. And it's an interesting cognitive dissonance. So you have kind of this, they share an enemy, but they also, so for Edaran prisoners, it's kind of this interesting, dynamic. I see a little bit of that as Meridia, her soldiers come in where everybody hates her because good old misogynism. Not good old, but it's a uniting factor for some really shitty people from really shitty perspectives. And when she comes in, so it's like you see kind of this moment of unity, but you also kind of see these, like when Val is asking for some more food for the hounds, where they're like, and Val's like, they're treating me like an ex, which is pretty serious. It's like I'm gonna be a prisoner, but you're treating me like one of them. Which I think definitely is poignant in the times of race struggles that are going on in the U.S. right now. But I digress. Touching again on Meridia, one of the things I really wanted to make a point of in this series was having a ton, like just not one or two, but like a ton of well-developed badass female characters. For some reason, in fantasy, it's like you don't see all that much all the time. You either have kind of this obviously like damsel in distress, like over-sexualized female characters, or you have kind of the opposite thing where they're just like these Mary Sues, who are just perfect, at everything. And I really wanted to try and create characters who, just had the same amount of diversity and complexity, just from a different perspective. It's a challenging and sort of fulfilling exercise sometimes to try and work beyond your own tendencies, experience, habits, and biases, to try to live life through the lens of a character whose, racial, cultural, gender, sexual experience is different than you. And it's something that I try and work on. Again, no claims that any of this is going to be perfect. Anytime that you're going to write from someone who has a different gender, a different sort of race analog, a different sexuality, a different religious structure, you're an outsider. You're an outsider trying to approximate it as best as you can. And it's an effort. And it's something that I definitely make an effort to try to do. But no claims is perfect. And it's like I'm writing from the best that I can see and the best I can listen to in life. But that's something I really strive for, and it's something I try to be conscious of as I'm writing. Sometimes I think how could we, flip this on its head? How could we make this character more, diverse? For lack of a better word, how could we take this character who I might have drawn kind of subconsciously from the mono myth of many fantasy series, and how could by simply changing, it's amazing. It's by changing their race analogs, by changing their sexuality, by changing their cultural identity, by changing their gender, how might that simple character suddenly become, how might that archetype evolve and change? And it's like Meridia is, it's like if Meridia was a man, it's like a lot of the actions here would be totally would have been done to death. It's like, oh, it's like it's a badass rival, but it's like, you've got instead, it's like, she's a woman, and there's a lot more complexity to it. It's like you kind of have these extra layers, and it's kind of fun and interesting when sometimes you can, and that's why having this world that has many different types of people in it is actually very freeing, because you can kind of tweak around with it, and you can take a archetype or a stereotype from fiction, draw from it, and then just twist it a little bit, and it's kind of fun. And then again, my final disclaimer: no promises that it's perfect, but no one can write every perspective perfectly. Speaking of perspectives that you can't write perfectly, I have some notes on my because I write these out and post them as a blog post afterward. And I'm just I like to keep my notes on paper and make sure that I'm kind of not rambling. I have little headers kind of reminding me what I'm about to talk about. This most recent one is, what would Jesus do? So speaking of people whose perspectives I don't quite claim to be able to capture, we finally come to one of the central twists to Val's kind of exiled returning hero journey, which is that no one believes him. This isn't a totally new idea. I could think of like Braveheart. I think I've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, a few movies that kind of both the idea of the hero coming back and everyone not believing that they are who they say they are, especially when it's like a legendary figure. But I really wanted to dive deep and explore this one with a sort of religious undercurrent that's taken up since Val saved Edara. One of the things I kind of thought to ask was, like, if Jesus came back right now, what if he came here? It's like most people, if someone was like, "Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Jesus," people would probably think he was crazy. And if he didn't have like the miracles or the presence of the Holy Spirit, those kind of intangible things that make him, Jesus, to back him up, I think he'd get judged as everything from crazy to dangerously subversive, and that's exactly the rap that Val gets. Only time will tell if he has it in him to rise to this challenge of these actions that he did back in the war that have grown far beyond themselves. So I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. And anyway, moving on to chapter 7, Blackout. This was a deep dive into a pit party. There's a joke here that my college buddies will get. Howdy, boys, from college. I'll give you a minute to figure out why the header of this section, a deep dive into a pit party, should make absolutely certain that you get the joke. Scotty got it late. Messaged me and was like, Anyway, so in this chapter we can see kind of the ins and outs of a pit party, and as it turns out, the people who work behind the scenes are having a much better time than the customers, or at least a much rowdier time. My brief experience as camp counselor, bartender, and in the service industry showed me that when people behind the scenes finally get the party, they let it out. There's just this anticipation of being surrounded and involved, but kind of having to be controlled and responsible and in charge of things, that just multiplies that eventual moment of release. And like everything else that's turned up to 11 in the pit, Flair is a theater of decadence, and it's absolutely the best spot for this. Speaking of Flair, and kind of many people within it, one thing I guess this is my rant on bad fantasy, I guess, but one of the things I think fantasy can get wrong sometimes is kind of the variable palette, a spectrum, if you will, of different preferences, sexualities, and personalities that people can have, which is funny. I think people a lot of times fantasy gets written in kind of this strange Eurocentric, very heavily what's it called, Tolkien influence. It's just that when you think of fantasy, there's a standard knights and dragons. It is very Eurocentric, and it's funny because you think a world that is so thoughtfully imagined, and when you take this time to like create these complex lands and fictional places filled with, it's like you'd think there would be a little more diversity to people. And I often find that it's different. I often find that it's like everyone feels just like it can get a little lame or boring. I don't know. You can of course imagine how how shocked I was when I kind of entered the real world after being a fantasy bookworm for so long. It was like, wow, like not everyone acts like a 18th century British person or like a European. Not everyone acts like everyone in Lord of the Rings. It's like growing up in New Orleans. Spend time in Atlanta, Tamarindo, a little touch of Europe, and kind of the many places like that. A few dances with sex and substance, and you see that things are far more complicated than you can ever capture. And it's so funny because you have a fantasy world, and there are some series that absolutely do this fantastic. Neil Gaiman, I think, he really captures it. But like so often, you kind of have these things where it's like, oh, like we're gonna have an awesome fantasy world, and everyone is just like exactly the same cultural identity. Like everyone seems like the same. And it's weird. It's weird. It's like it feels like it's sterile somehow. So I tried to add a little bit of rawness to this series. People are weird. People are freaky. People are kind of sexy, but also horrifying and gross. Like when people are on drugs, they get really weird, and kind of a funny, beautiful, terrifying way. So that's kind of what this hit party was. It's like yeah, like people are weird and strange. Like it's like there's not just one way that people act. Anyway, but we also see the dark side of it here. Just like there are some wonderful sides of drugs and decadence, there are also some real dark sides to this place. People get lost in the pit. They just give up on life. It's kind of not really. People die at pit parties, and no one gives a fuck. This is not like it's kind of this fun, like it's like romanticizing. I do want to emphasize that, but it's like it's also this is kind of a messed up place. Like Lucy's a badass, but she's also a functioning alcoholic and very much addicted to many substances, and she's quickly falling apart. These people around like that are partying are hardened criminals and killers and broken people who are all coming together to kind of share this collective illusion of joy. The other people get to like kind of experience and leave, and they kind of see what's behind it. I don't know. It's like this chapter was like you get to really dive into the fact that the wonderful parts exist because of the negatives, but the negatives exist because of the wonderful parts. There's kind of there's a balance there. BC is clearly running away from the Machine King, and she's just pounding drinks, and she blacks out, and he's there. She can practically hear his voice, and then we see this combination of color and darkness and chaos kind of reign as the late hours happen. It's you kind of have this conflict of like everyone's out there feeling kind of like oh, free love, like we're all doing drugs, like we're all like just loving each other. It's very hippie-esque, and then in the middle of that, like some mercenaries show up and try to rape a girl, and BC just straight up murders them, like in a very brutal way, and then starts a brawl that is only narrowly avoids like way more people dying, because the owners interrupt. This is not an imaginary wonderland. We in BC are reminded of that all too harshly. My next section header I have to read because it's something borrowed, something which I just liked too much to not share that one. So a little side note on some of the characters in this chapter and some of their homages. I always like to draw from people in real life and kind of distill people. For example, I actually voiced Clay just as I was finishing up watching Tiger King. So you notice that his voice sounds an awful lot like Joe Exotic. You're right. What a devastatingly fascinating and horrible person that is. Frida, the flamboyant owner of Flair, is an homage to the absolute queen of bounce, Big Frida, who is a New Orleans icon, and such a powerful presence that like there's very little difference between Big Frida and Frida in the series. It was just like, this is a larger than life character, like just like copy paste, like, oh, here you are, like listen to some Big Frida today, like do yourself here and listen to some Big Frida. And then the Jackal just sort of came to me. I kind of picture him played a little bit by Mahershala Ali, but with Morpheus glasses on. I don't know. Very refined and elegant, which is a fun contrast with the very bloody business he deals in. Anyway, and then speaking of characters, the last two characters that we focus on are Nay and BC. This was another one of those parts of a chapter that took a few iterations to get totally right. You have all these factors that come into play. You know, the relationship between May and BC, how intense BC's response to May would be, how intense May's response to BC would be, how their history went, how much each of them knew. These were all factors I had to consider and make sure went just right to make the scene feel organic and real and do justice to these two characters. I probably let the simulation run about 6 times before I got to a version I liked. It's funny how much blurry backstory becomes actually very concrete for the necessity of like single details and scenes. I like to keep things sort of general. I like to give myself some wiggle room with backstory and history, yada yada yada, so I can write moments that feel right. Every once in a while, something will happen in a scene, and I just go, "Wow, shit! Well, it looks like I need to invent a new sport," and then it's like, and I'll go. Anyway, it's like no telling which details here are an example of that because that's a long-term spoiler, but we'll get to it. But yeah, no, it's like it's kind of funny how in writing I kind of have to go, oh, I gotta build something. It's like, all right, in chapter 1 I need to have this thing, and in chapter 2 I need to have this thing. Oh, chapter 6, boom, boom, bop. So anyway, move on to chapter 8. The gears turn. Starting off with Edda and Rowan. Now, I'm a dog person, although slowly being convinced about cats because my little cutie Stardust. Where is she? Well, she's sleeping. Oh, look at her fluffy belly. Anyway, Edda and Rowan are super fun to write. I imagine sort of a hybrid between German shepherds and big honking wolves, with Edara being the slightly smarter, better tracker, a little gentler, and Rowan is kind of a bigger, more of a troublemaker, and he's a fighter. Now, both of them have the same wide range of skills, though, and you know, some dogs can learn like upwards of 250 commands. I've only written like 14 so far, so like I got room. We also see a little bit of weakness from Val this chapter. I'm a big believer in I quote Brene more often than a lot of people, but it's like vulnerability is what makes us human, and even Val's not immune to that. As strong and as steady as he is, he's tired, he's injured, he's torn from sleep, he's caged, he's surrounded by this awakening long-time enemy that he was fighting his whole life, and now rather than having the entire Edaran military at his back, which was already a task, now they're looking for him too, and there's a serious moment of doubt here. But what makes Val a hero isn't that he's never afraid. Cyrus talks, has a quote in the beginning of the book about, it's like courage is moving on, even when the winds of fear and uncertainty whip around you. And this is a moment of pretty heavy fear and uncertainty for Val. And all it takes a little spark, that little call out, and a little reminder of who he's here defending, what he's fighting for, even if it's the country's cast him out for now, to send that fire burning in Val again, and he sets out into the escape from the new city. Now, one of the things I like to think about, one of the ways I describe writing the Seventh Valkyrie, it's like I'm going sledding. And now I'm from New Orleans, so we didn't do much sledding, but I have been sledding on occasion up snowy places. And it's a lot of choosing the right clothes, polishing the sled, getting it ready, making sure it's not, making sure I pick you up the right hill, make sure you get there safely, hiking up the hill, getting all situated. A lot of prep, a lot of before time, and you push off, and then from there you just sink in and enjoy the ride. All of that setup, all the ideas, everything you've done to put in the time there, all the pieces just move. And that's what scenes like this can be sometimes. It's like you put all these pieces together, and then it's just like chapter 8 was just a release of the tension. You have 8 chapters that have built up to this set piece. You've got all these different factors of what does the city look like? What's the difference? What are the tensions between Freelanders and the Edarans? Who and what is happening in the club? What is this tension between the Edarans? What have they done to prepare in the 7 years after the war? And then all of a sudden you see all this happen very, very quickly as they kind of run down. Now it's also interesting because on occasion I need to set something up. Like I need to make sure that there are wave runners to make up for the getaway, and that makes me change something like 6 chapters before. Which it's like it would be like if you're sledding down a hill and you pause and you go, oh, I forgot my shoes. And so it's like stop and you go and like make sure that you went back and changed your shoes, and you're like, okay, cool. So it's not exactly like sledding in that regard. Sometimes I do have to like stop and be like, oh shit, like I really need this to happen, but I've got to make sure that I've built it up first. But that's the fun thing about writing, and the fun thing about metaphors, like having sledding be your form of writing. You can just kind of play around with writing with metaphors until you get it right. So let me see, check some notes. Anyway, that's actually what I got for this week. That's my little director's commentary. You can leave a comment here, and if I get any questions, I'll make sure to answer them. In the meantime, for the next one, make sure you've listened to or read a little background. I'm actually shooting this one earlier in the morning than I usually do. But yes, read chapter 9, Among the Twisting Streets, chapter 10, The Awakening Hunger, and chapter 11, A Strange Presence. Sorry, Freudian slip there. By next week, in the meantime, stay safe, and in the words of Bill and Ted, as always, be excellent to each other. I love that. I just love those guys. Oh my god, the new Bill and Ted show's out. Crazy. Anyway, date this, make it not evergreen. Who cares? Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed this little director's commentary, and we're making our way through the book. Bye.